Hey everyone, welcome to this week's segment of the Black Girl Inspire Her. I am your host, Sheniqua Inspires, and I am super excited to bring this special guest. She is a very special guest to me, and you all are going to have the honor of meeting her. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring her to the stage. Hey, Miss Roweena, how are you?
How are you?
Good, good, good. Listen, I am super excited to have you here with us today because I know for a fact that you have some inspiration that you are going to want everyone to take part in. So, the purpose and premise of this show is to really focus in on inspiration because I feel like there's a time in our lives, we go through these seasons, we go through these shiftings, and we don't have the inspiration or we start to lack inspiration. So I am super honored to be able to bring on guests who can just lend you some of this inspiration. And let me tell you, everyone that I'm bringing on has been very influential in my life and inspiring me and bringing forth that inspiration for myself. So today I've got my friend Roweena. Roweena, I know you. Please introduce yourself to everyone else.
I sure can. Hi, everyone. My name is Roweena. I am a 20-year Army veteran. I retired in October of 2020. What I also like to share with everyone with my introduction is I am a domestic violence survivor. I'm the founder of We Believe You SOS, supporting our survivors, which supports survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. I am also the mother of two beautiful girls, ages 16 and age 8. And I'm the mother of also a pit bull who is 2. She's also a female. So I'm a household full of all girls and all females. So it's a struggle every day. But I am really, really kind of excited to be here. Actually, very excited to be here and hopefully, inspire you all with some of the words and things that I have for tips with inspiration. So thank you again for having me. It means a lot. It really does mean a lot.
You are welcome. Listen, you got a 16-year-old. I have a 16-year-old. How's that going for you?
It's by myself. It's not. It's a struggle every day, but hopefully the things that she sees and the things that I'm talking about, are is something that resonates with her and she can use it later on in adult life. So it's a challenge having a teenager, especially as a girl,
Yes.
trying to teach them all the things that you wish you had known when you were a teenager. So I'm hoping
Mhm.
that for me a little bit.
Listen, honey, I know I'm raising a boy, so the struggle is even realer. People think that raising boys are easier. No, they're
Yeah.
not easier. It's just different than raising a girl. So my hat's off to you, honey. I understand. Look, that's all we need to say to each other. Is like, I
Under-
understand. So for parents of teenagers, we understand you. We do, we do. Some days are good days, some days are great days, but then those other days, it's like, whew, okay.
yeah.
Now we have a good understanding as to who you are as a mother, as a being. You mentioned that you are also a domestic violence survivor. Can you
Right.
just share with people what that even really means to be a domestic violence survivor?
I sure can. I also wanted to put out and share, and we could talk about that another or a little bit later. But um, I also lost a son to SIDS
Mhm.
in 2007, so I also suffer from that trauma too. But in regards to being a domestic violence survivor, a lot of times when people hear that term, they immediately think about the physical part, and they don't really associate it with the emotional abuse and the financial abuse. So my domestic violence story really started probably a year after we got married. It was one time at first. And after that, I didn't think it would happen again. With all domestic violence survivors, they always tell you it's never going to happen again and they won't do it again. And it's a one time thing. But of course, that never happens. For him, it wasn't a one time thing. It was really a two-time thing. The first one was a black eye. The second one was just slapping me to the ground. But after that, he didn't use physical abuse. But what he did was he used emotional abuse. And this was with negative words, negative self-talk, putting me down for being a mom that I am, calling me a bad mom, saying things such as, that I was the one responsible for my son's death, that I should actually, look to other moms for a source of inspiration and learn how to be a mom, calling me out my name. So it was years and years of emotional abuse. So from 2009 to probably about 2016, when I finally said that I had enough, that is when I just packed up my little bag. It wasn't anything really at all. Left all the furniture, left all the clothing, got my little one from daycare, and we moved. Luckily for me, I was a DA civilian and still am. I was able to live on post, so took my kids, moved on post, and we stayed there on base until I bought my house. But yeah, that's what it is for a domestic violence survivor. For me, it's just recognizing the fact that not only is it physical, but it's also emotional and mental as well. And those are some of the scars that stick with you way after you even decide to leave your abuser.
Mhm. And that does lead us into one of the reasons why I asked you to be a guest to sit with me and to talk about is because you really do help people as far as their self-esteem. You've got this gifting, and it's a beautiful part of what you do. And so tell us a little bit about what self-esteem looks like when you're going through an abusive relationship, or just to broaden it up, when you're in a situation that's, dare I say, less than where you should be, right?
So
Emotionally less than where you should be. What does that look like?
So I'll tell you this. Self-esteem for me actually started, and what you might hear is something similar to other domestic violence survivors too. And I didn't put two and two together, but it actually started when I was like 13 or 14. And my dad called me a name. He said I was fat and that I needed to look like the other women, or I needed to look like my mom, because my mom is super skinny, really pretty. So he compared me to her. So at that time, I didn't really realize that the words from a man that was the first man that was supposed to love me and pour into me and pour inspiration to me would lead me down a path of being in toxic relationships. And my husband wasn't the first, he wasn't the first toxic person, but he was the first toxic, abusive person that I ever stayed with and lasted with for so long. For self esteem, for me, is really started when I was 13 years old. And it
Mm,
just on into adulthood with that feeling of not being good enough, not feeling worthy, not feeling like I was good enough to be in a relationship, not feeling pretty, never really feeling pretty, always feeling like I had to change something about myself to fit
mhm,
someone else's mold and to fit what they thought was best for me or what they thought was best for them. So self-esteem, especially when you're going through a domestic violence relationship, it might not be the same with everyone, but for me, there is none, and I had none.
mm,
My self-esteem was taken through the ringer those years that I was married to my husband. And it was already shot in the beginning anyway. I already struggled from it. I already didn't have self esteem in the beginning. So to be in an abusive relationship, to be in an emotionally abusive relationship where you're hearing things about yourself, negative things about yourself on a daily basis, it just sunk my self esteem all the way to the bottom, to the point where, I couldn't say positive things about myself. I didn't think positive things about myself. I'm a super educated, and this isn't to brag, but, a lot of people think that when you're in a domestic violence relationship, that, it's fits one demographic, but I was successful, educated Black woman. I had a very good paying job. I had great income. I had a lot of things going for me, but I still had that relationship that made me feel like all those other things that Roweena was doing that was amazing, those were put to the back burner and didn't even matter, because what mattered was the things that he put into my head, and the things that he thought about me were the most important things that I had in the forefront of my mind. So forget that Roweena has a degree. Forget that Roweena is
mhm,
called beautiful by other people. Forget that Roweena knows her. Other people know Rowena's self-worth. If my husband said that and he didn't believe
Mm.
some of the things and he poured negativity into me, then that's all that was ever on my mind. So from that point on, from 2009, and even I can even say up until really last year, maybe 2 years ago, the most really recent is when I really started the journey to figure out how to get self-esteem, how to make myself feel worthy for myself. Because if you look at those terms, everything in the beginning is about self. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
else. It's not about anyone else's opinion. It's all about self. And until I figured that out and started figuring out that journey, while it's not perfect, you know, that's kind of what I had to do. And it was really, really recent. For me, to answer your question again,
Wow.
self-esteem was non-existent when I was in my domestic violence relationship. I didn't have it. And I didn't have it from 13, I would say, up until the age of 40. And I'm
Wow.
43.
Okay, so let's define it, because I don't want people to think that this conversation about self-esteem, and we're going to get into talking about validation as well. I don't want them to categorize it for just being those who have experienced domestic violence. No, let's talk about self-esteem just on a general level. If you had to describe what it is, what would you say would be the general definition of self-esteem?
The general definition for me of self-esteem is just that, having esteem in yourself. And that means not looking to other people to give you something, not looking for other people to pour into your self-worth, not looking for other people to boost you up, not looking for other people to always have to pour into you for you to have that boost of self-esteem. Because if you have it within you internally already, while it's not always be perfect, people think all the time that, hey, I have self-esteem, I have it going on, I'm so positive every day, I think I look beautiful and smart every day. And that's not the case. You really have to work hard for self-esteem. And for me, it's just making sure that whatever you say about yourself, whatever you think about yourself, whatever you pour into yourself, that is the most important thing that you can do, because it's for yourself. And as when you start listening to other people, then that's when it's really a
Mhm.
detriment to your self-esteem. So for me, self-esteem is really just focusing on your own self and pouring into your own self, and making sure that all the negative chatter and other things that come from outside sources aren't feeding into you, and that you're actually feeding into yourself.
I love that. I love that. So self-esteem, it really is how you regard yourself. So when no one else is watching, when no one else is around, it's what do you say about you?
Right.
And one of the beautiful points about it is, most of the time we think about self-esteem being something that someone else has told us. So if someone tells you you're not beautiful, or if someone tells you you're not worthy, that's what makes you have this what we call low self-esteem. No, self-esteem is how you refer and you regard yourself. So even if someone else says you're not beautiful, if you know you're beautiful, you're like, oh, that's not my story. That's not my testimony. I don't agree with you. I can't validate that, and you're able to maintain. So there's no low. But when we constantly believe that the most important voice that we hear comes from someone else, that's when we have a shift in that self-esteem, because self-esteem as a whole is not a negative term. It's actually a really, really good term. It's a description of how you see yourself and how you value yourself and the image you have of you. But if someone else's opinion now supersedes what you believe to be true, that's when we start to have this low self-esteem. And one of the things that I find funny is that we often think of that negative chatter coming
Mhm.
from other people.
It too.
To be honest with you, the voice that we hear the most
Head.
is our own.
Mhm.
right? When nobody's around, you're laying in the bed, that chatter, that comes from you. Now, it could be reflective of what other people have said, and you're kind of replaying that back. But the voice we hear the most is truly what it is that we're saying to ourselves. So, Roweena, what would you say to someone? Well, first of all, because I want to make certain people are identifying. Can you describe to us what someone with low self-esteem would look like or how they would behave? Because I want people to be able to capture this. So let's start with defining things. So how would somebody even know if they had low self-esteem?
So I can tell you it from my perspective, and that's only because
Hmm.
other people might have it look differently. But for me personally, for me, with defining self-esteem and kind of what it looks like is when hmm, is two things. And I'll say two things because this is how it affected me. So when number one is when I started believing the beliefs of other people, and their opinions mattered more than my own. And number two, like you mentioned before, what my therapist used to tell me is that I have to flip the script in my mind, because a lot of the thoughts that I had were in my mind, and a lot of the thoughts I had about myself were in my mind. So I would
Hmm.
say that the biggest part of self esteem and what you can look for, sometimes a lot of the words that people feed into you, like you mentioned, Sheniqua, will resonate in you for years. And that
Hmm.
thought will resonate in your mind for years. So I'll give you an example. For years, I never thought that I was good enough. I didn't think that I was
Hmm.
pretty. And that is because growing up, number one, my dad told me that I wasn't, and he compared me to
Hmm.
my mom. Number two, in high school, I would always get, um, pretty girls, me, were always the ones that were popular, always the ones that were chosen over me by men. And they always used to get all the attention, and I never got any of the attention. In college, it was the same way. And then in my marriage, I was then again, told that I wasn't as pretty as some of the other girls that he had been with. So for years, this thought has been in my head that Rowena's not pretty. So it must be true that because other people are saying Rowena's not pretty, that thought in my head now is like, well, yeah, Roweena, you're not pretty. And that thought resonated in my head, and sometimes still creeps up a little bit. But that thought resonated in my head for years. So I think
Hmm.
for me, recognizing that the thoughts in your head, when they begin to empower you, when they begin to overtake you, and when you have these negative thoughts that keep popping up into your head, then that's when you can kind of recognize sometimes that you are struggling with low self esteem, when the thoughts
Hmm.
in your head and the thoughts of other people matter than what your own thought is. So that's how I kind of had to capture it with my own self esteem, is recognizing that flipping the script in my head, sometimes these thoughts are not really actual true statements and true facts.
Right.
And if I believe in my head that I'm not pretty, then what are some facts that make it believe
There
and
you
make
go.
me believe that I am not pretty? Roweena, are you really saying that you're not pretty? And are you really not pretty because of what you think? Or are you really not pretty because these negative thoughts that you've been feeding yourself and other people have fed into is what you're thinking? So if Roweena flips the script and says, hey, Roweena, you know what? You are pretty. You are amazingly beautiful. You look in the mirror every day and you see a beautiful creature that was created by God. You look in the mirror
Yes.
every day. Hey, it doesn't matter. And I'm not even talking about the physical features, right? I'm
Yes.
talking the spirit. I'm talking about the things that I feel about myself. And if I say, "Hey, Roweena, oh, you have a great skin. Your hair is beautiful. You have great cheekbones." If I look in the mirror and I believe that of myself, then those are factual statements to me that negate those negative statements about me not being pretty, either from myself or from other people. So for me, anyone struggling with self-esteem, you have to realize that a lot of the thoughts that are going on in your head are not factual thoughts. Those are thoughts that
Yes.
have been imprinted in your head, number one, by others. And then because of that
Mhm.
imprint, you start to believe that those things are true. So you have to learn how to flip the script in your head and make it, ask yourself those questions. Are these statements or are these thoughts in my head accurate and true statements? And if they're not, then how can I prove that they're actual and factual statements? So that's kind of
I
my
love
thought.
that. I love that. And today's society, we are full aware of fact check. Anytime say somebody says something on, social media, it's like fact check. We got to check the validity of what it is that this person is saying and is
Right.
it true? So why is it that we just so willingly accept what someone else says? And low self-esteem comes from um, it everybody has those thoughts, whether it's you don't think that you're beautiful because of society casting this image of what quote unquote beauty is supposed to be, or
Right.
could it be from something that you've heard all the years growing up?
Right.
But it also goes beyond that. It's about your worthiness. Sometimes you wake up, you don't feel worthy. That's where imposter syndrome comes in. People they love that terminology, imposter syndrome. It's when you have all of the degrees, all of the accolades, everything, like you're literally looking at the facts. Everything says that you are qualified and you are capable of holding this position, being on the stage, being, celebrated, but
Right.
something deep inside of you is saying, no, that can't be true. So
Mm-hmm.
we really do need to get to the point where we are fact checking. And
Yep.
if I might add, one of my favorite places to fact check is the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Mm-hmm.
keeps it real simple with me. So
Oh,
I'm going to match it up to the Word of God. If God didn't say it, then it
mm-hmm.
ain't true. It's not so. So the fact, if somebody wants to say, well, Sheniqua, you're not beautiful. Well, the devil is a lie.
Okay.
The devil is a lie because God says that I am beautiful. How on earth could I be the apple of his eye if I weren't beautiful?
Right. Right.
I am beautiful, right? So we do need to find something to hold true as our factual statements. And even if you don't feel it, right? Because we always love our emotions. Those emotions get us in trouble. Because we don't feel beautiful does not mean that you are not beautiful.
Yeah. And what I found or used to find is that even when I'm not feeling beautiful, sometimes what people will do with low self-esteem is that they'll start to overcompensate and not be satisfied with
Mm,
what I have. Like for instance, I recently bought it, and this was before I recently bought a house. I'm like, well, okay, that's great accomplishment. That's good. That's amazing, Roweena. 1 year later, in my head, I was like, oh, well, that's not enough because I see other people who are getting these big mansions
mm,
and making sure that their house looks great. And here I am feeling like I have a basic house. So now I have to do something else
wow.
to prove that I'm worthy. So let me go start researching if I need to buy a new car. So I started researching if I needed to buy a new car because, hey, maybe I can keep up with others and keep up with what I think things
Hmm.
should and fit in. So let me start researching buying a new car. So sometimes that will trickle over and over
Hmm.
again. Don't feel worthy when you don't have self-esteem. You'll start to overcompensate and start to do
Yes.
toxic things that will make you feel better about yourself. And when people think of toxic things, they think of substances and anything like that. My toxic thing was spending money and not being financially responsible. So whenever I felt not
Wow.
beautiful, I would do things in my head that I would think, hey, this is going to make me feel beautiful. Buying these clothes are going to make me feel beautiful. Buying this extra thing that I know that I probably don't need is going to make me feel beautiful and compensate for the fact that I don't feel beautiful. So having toxic traits and toxic habits isn't all about just substances. It could be anything. And for me, it was spending money and not being financially stable. Even though I had the means all the time to do what I needed to do with money, I didn't feel I was good enough. So let me make myself feel
Mhm.
good enough. Let me boost my self esteem by going out and doing, and I'm not saying spending, because you want to or because you want to treat yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like frivolous spending and knowing
Mhm. Mhm.
$5 in your bank account but using those $5 to purchase something that you feel you need because you need to make yourself feel better about yourself. So that's another thing I
Right,
wanted to add,
right.
part two.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's talk about validation.
Yes.
What is that and what do we need to know about it?
Let me tell you about validation. So validation for me, it looks like validation for me came from outside sources. And it's almost similar
Mhm.
to self esteem. So, validation for me meant that if someone said that Roweena was beautiful, that validated that Roweena was beautiful. If someone didn't
Mm,
say Roweena was beautiful, then guess what? I need to go find someone else that says it because I don't feel it within myself. And my self validation was enough. Or even the simple fact that I used to get so hung up on likes and comments on social media,
mhm,
having that validation. So, for me, when I first started my nonprofit, I felt like it always wasn't very supported. And I used to say, hey, I used to not get likes. I used to not get people supporting. I used to not, well, let me put it this way. I used to not get the number of likes or the number of followers
mhm,
I think I needed to be successful with my nonprofit. But it wasn't again until I realized that, Roweena, you can have 1 million people follow you, or you can have one person follow you. If that one
mhm,
person you are affecting is the most important person, that one person might be the person that needed that message over the 900 other followers that you might have that's just following you just to follow you. So I had
right.
to realize that self validation is more important than external validations. And if I'm validating
Mhm,
again that I'm beautiful, then that's all I need. I don't need to hear it from anybody else. I don't need a, and my biggest thing was hearing valid. My biggest negative thing is getting validation from men. And if a man
mm,
says, I'm beautiful, and this goes back again to the growing up part, if a man says that I'm beautiful, then, that's great. And that means something to me. And I would often
mhm,
hang on to that. I would hang on to him because, hey, he thinks Roweena is beautiful. Let me keep him around. Even if I knew he was toxic, even if I knew he didn't love me,
mhm,
know, that form of validation made me feel great. So for me, hearing that I was all these things from men and then probably it turned into something toxic later on. But in the beginning, hearing it all from men, because that's what I heard from my ex-husband that was abusive. You're beautiful, you're smart, you have a,
mhm,
but of course it turned into something else. But for me, validation is just recognizing that outside validation is not the only kind of validation that you need. If you don't have validation within yourself, if you're not validating the things that you have going on, and if you're not
right.
validating positive things with you, then that outside external validation doesn't even matter. So that's kind of my gist on
How they go
validation.
hand in hand.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I just feel like sometimes the proof is there,
yeah,
but we always feel like we have to have it co-signed or someone has to stamp their
mm,
approval on it. But you went to school, you passed the test, you know what you know. Why do we need someone to now co-sign on what the college already
yeah,
said?
yes, I agree.
You're looking in the mirror. You see how beautiful your eyes are sparkling. You look how pearly white your teeth are, and when you smile, it just brings joy to you. Why do you need somebody else to tell you that you're beautiful when you know this to be true? You
Yep,
know what it's like when you get your hair done, your nails done, and everything's done. You know what it's like, and you know that you are who you are, and you feel good about who you are. Why do we constantly need someone to put their seal of approval? Like, what makes that person's opinion
valuable.
so much more valuable than your own?
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for a while, and that's important that you said that too, because it does for me. I always felt that if someone didn't co sign for something, and that's a good word to use, I like that. If someone didn't co
Mm-hmm.
that I did in my life, then it wasn't valid enough. If someone didn't co sign and say, hey, Roweena, if I posted pictures per se, right? Not anymore. When I
Mm-hmm.
of myself. If I didn't get people saying, Roweena, you're so beautiful, you look so good, you're doing great, you're doing amazing. If I didn't get those comments, then that picture that I posted meant that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't pretty enough. So, hey, these people don't think that I'm pretty. So it must be true. But not realizing
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't really matter if someone comments or someone likes or if someone shares or if someone does anything or someone doesn't do anything. That doesn't validate anything that you have going on within you. And the only validation that you need is the one that comes from yourself.
Yes, I like that. And it brings a point that people get held hostage in all the time: social media. Social media is literally the death of people. Like, if you don't get a like, then it's the end of the world. But it could be the doggone algorithm. Like, you're literally basing your livelihood on something that could be due to something else. It could be due to the algorithm. Maybe no one legitimately saw it, right? Maybe you posted it at the wrong time when your viewers are not there. But here you are internalizing it. Oh, they're not supporting me. Haters gonna hate. Like, you're coming up with all of this negative rationale behind it, when actuality, it could just be due to timing. And I'll be honest with you all, there was a time in my life where I used to sit and I would post something and I would sit and wait for people to like it. No, if I like it, then it's good.
Right.
If the content that I put it and then I move away from it, because I'm not going to allow myself to be sucked in on something that's strategically mastermind by the people and the powers that be. Like, that has
Right.
nothing to do with you. So I would encourage everyone: do not look to social media as your means of validation. Learn how to build your self validation tool and skills up, so that once you do something, once you have created it, it's good.
Right.
Right? You're not waiting for the world to say it's good. It's like, I've already put my hands on it, and therefore it is good.
Right. Right.
Now,
Yep.
whether somebody likes it or not, that ain't none of their business. Now, if I bake a cake, I know I can bake. That's one thing I can do. And if I bake a cake, I don't even have to taste the cake to know it's good, because I know I done put my foot in it, and I'm like, I did that. It's good. And if somebody comes along and tastes the cake and says, this is not how I eat, my chocolate cake, that's on you. But I know it's still good. I
Right.
know it's still good because what I do is good. So I love this conversation about self-esteem. And keep in mind, there's that low piece, because we all should have self-esteem. We all should hold ourselves to a high regard. Whether or not we hear anything from society validating that, we should be able to have our own self-esteem and our own self-validation that's on point.
Right.
Right? But it's when people start to get to the lower end, for some reason, something happens and they start to get depleted. And now they start looking for outside sources. So,
Mm-hmm.
Rowena, before we go, give us some final thoughts, some final just words of inspiration and encouragement that you could give to someone who may be feeling like they're struggling because they always need someone else to tell them they're good enough.
One piece of advice that I can give to that is to always, and I always use this term and I don't use it lightly, and a lot of the things that happen are something that might be created in your mind. And I always use the term
Mm-hmm.
script. I use it all the time. I use it for everything, because if you start to feel, that you need someone else's validation, if you start to feel that those negative thoughts are creeping in, flip the script and make sure,
Mm-hmm.
start, even if you have to write down that negative thought that's coming into your head, or write down that
Mm-hmm.
that you don't feel validated, and they write it at the top, and then underneath that write down 3 facts that make it true or 3 facts that make it not true, and then you
Mm-hmm.
will start to see, that your pattern for that negative self-thinking or not having validation will start to change, and you'll pick it up quicker. It took me 2 years to get to that
Wow.
point where I would flip the script and I would have to fact check almost everything that came into my head that was not of God, number one, and that was not of me and the way I felt about
Mm-hmm.
myself. I would always say to anyone listening, check your facts that are going on in your head. Check the facts that you have with your thoughts, and see if those thoughts are even true. Because most of the time, 99% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
the and feelings that we have going on are not true. And it's just something that
Right.
we're trained, and it's something that we just think that we are. So I always just say
Yeah.
flip the script, do a fact check, and just know that you are not your thoughts.
Yes, I love that. Make certain when you all are fact checking, make sure their facts are facts.
Mm,
Right? None of this somebody else's opinion. You now think it's factual because somebody else said. Like, make sure they're God's honest, truth bearing facts.
mhm,
Okay, I love that. And one of the things that I got in my spirit when you were talking, Rowena, is if someone is feeling like they're experiencing low self esteem and they're having this low self validation, they might want to spend some time with themselves, right?
yes.
So think about when you're dating, right? You're dating this guy and or female, depending on who you are. So you're dating, you're in this relationship, right? The reason why you go out on dates is so you can get to know them,
Right.
right? You get to know who they are, how they act in certain situations and circumstances. So it's a learning about them moment of time.
Right.
So why not spend some time with yourself to
Mm-hmm.
get to know you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when you wake up in the morning, you're not quote unquote beautiful in your eyes. Well, how about when you put some water on your face and you put on a good moisturizer? Because I'm telling you, when I get up in the morning, no hair. Listen, I ain't all like this when I wake up. I do not wake up like this. But let me tell you, let me put splash some water on my face and get my moisturizer on there. Baby, it's a whole nother look going on. And then if I decide to go up an extra notch, that's when I put the makeup on. And then it's like, wow, girl, wow. So spend some time getting to know you and to
Yeah.
love you in all forms,
Yeah.
right?
Ocean.
So I would say get to know yourself. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Rowena.
Sorry, I just wanted to, because every time you talk, you always bring me to something. I make sure that listeners know is that it for a while I was the type of person I believed I had to be in a relationship to make myself feel better
Mm,
about myself. I was so afraid of being by myself. I was so afraid of being
mhm,
thoughts. I was like, I have to be with someone. But like you just
mhm.
said, spend time with yourself. It's okay to be by yourself, because being alone does not mean that you're lonely. Being alone just
Right.
means you're focusing on you and focusing on yourself. So focus, like you said, Sheniqua, focus on the relationship with yourself and get to know you. And then maybe, for me, I know once I got to know myself, I was able to start building healthier relationships, or get in the process of
Mhm.
building relationships. That's another point too, but you brought up a good point. I like that.
I love it. I love it. Listen, I wish we can go on and have this conversation because both of us will think of something while the other is talking, and we literally can be here for hours.
Uh,
Rowena, let's talk about what you're up to lately and how people can get in contact with you.
Sure, absolutely. So, like I said before, I am the founder of We Believe You SOS, supporting our survivors. We support survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault with resources. We have a main focus on our military members, veterans, and military spouses. So, we make sure that we advocate for them. So, if you want to follow us, make sure you follow us on Instagram at We Believe You SOS. We also have the website that's listed up there as well as www.webelieveyousos.com. So if you ever want to donate, we give backpacks to survivors of domestic violence once a month. So if you ever want to support and want to donate and give back, you can always visit our website. One thing we have up and coming is in April. You can follow us, like I said, on our Instagram, and for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We are doing a panel for our military survivors of sexual trauma. So if you're interested in learning more about the dynamics of being a military sexual assault survivor, and the process of healing and getting past that and starting to heal past those wounds, especially when you served your country and you feel like they didn't serve you, follow us on
Mhm.
social media. It's in April. It's going to be a great panel. I have some amazing survivors, amazing advocates who are going to be there. So that is what we have coming up in April. Also, look for an event that we're going to be hopefully partnering with Turnaround Inc. That is a local domestic violence sexual assault organization in Baltimore, Maryland. It's going to be similar to like a poetry night that we're going to be trying to put on for our military survivors and first responder survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, so they can kind of use their voice to get out their feelings of being a survivor in the first responder world or the military world. So look out for that and stay tuned for details.
I love it. And all of this information is going to be in the description. So everyone will be able to get the website, get the Instagram. And it doesn't hurt to follow. Like, so follow, offer your support, and just find ways that you'll be able to help, because we all need the inspiration. We all need the support. So it was a pleasure having a chat with you, Roweena. I thank you for saying yes to be here with me on today. Listen, everyone, this has just been such an amazing time, and I feel so inspired. I thank each and every one of you for joining us today on The Black Girl Inspire Her, where we are bringing forth this inspiration for everybody. We just so happen to do it from a Black girl's perspective. Stay tuned for the next amazing episode that's going to be coming up. And also make certain that you watch the other series, The Black Girl Motivate Her and The Black Girl Encourage Her. We're just bringing forth all of the encouragement, motivation, and inspiration. And I want to make certain that you all are getting every ounce of it. Okay, everyone, until then, you all have an amazing rest of your day, and God bless.